Our story takes place a few sunrises before the very first Christmas day. Very far away from this room in a desert, there was a camp in which lived an elderly and retired camel named Hoshmekah. But in this story, we will see that Hoshmekah is also quite foolish and proud. And thus, through his story, we will learn that you should never boast and that one should always be willing to help. So lean in, open your ears, and listen to my tale. The Last Straw by Frederick H. Thurby. Our story begins one cool night in which Hoshmekah was sleeping. He was dreaming of all the water in the world when suddenly the sand around him began to move, and it whirled up in a gentle tornado and began to whisper Hoshmekah's name. This caught his attention. So he opened one eye and asked the mysterious sand voices, "Why should I wake up?" And the voices replied, "Because you have been chosen. You will carry the gifts to the new baby king who is to be born very soon." But Hoshmekah was an old camel, and he felt that he had earned his rest. So as he began to very weakly climb to his feet, he said, "Why should I care about some new king? Let his servants take his gifts for him." But the sand refused to take no for an answer, and it carried on, saying, "The 3 wise men have chosen you. You will carry frankincense, myrrh, and gold to our new king." But Hoshmekah, not refusing to relent, continued on saying, "If these men are so wise, don't they know about my joints, my neck, my knees?" But the sand suddenly began to blow furiously, and it cut into the black night. "I've suddenly changed my mind," Hoshmekah said. After all, he had never seen anything like this moving and speaking sand. So he very quickly added, "When do I start? I'll need at least 2 months to prepare." But the sand cut him off and said, "You will begin today." And thus the sand dropped to the ground, and it was morning. It was still quite early as the servants of the wise men loaded their precious gifts onto Hoshmekah's back. And as they did so, the young camels of the camp ran to their good friend, and they said, "Why, you must be quite special to be chosen by the 3 wise men." Hoshmekah chuckled, and he puffed out his chest in pride. "Why, yes, I am quite special. I'm not so old. Why, I'm still as strong as 10 horses. The young camel said, My, then may we travel beside you? Oh, we're your friends, aren't we, Hoshmekah?" And Hoshmekah, in his most regal tone possible, replied, "Why, yes, you may travel beside me." And thus their long journey began. At noon that day, a herd of mountain goats came into view. Hoshmekah knew that they had traveled quite a long ways from their home in the north. One of the goats stepped forward and stated to the traveling herd of camels, "We have heard tell of the new king who is to be born. Please take our humble gift of milk with you." "You want him to carry milk?" Hoshmekah sputtered in shock. "I am not a simple milk-bearing camel, you see." At this, the younger camels all began to chorus, "No, he is not ordinary. He's very special. Why, he's as strong as 10 horses. And the goats began to look quite hopeful at this, and Hoshmekah knew there was no way getting out of it. So he said to the goats, "All right, goats, give me your gift." As the day carried onwards, a family of millers came into view. They were carrying heavy sacks of ground corn on their shoulders. And the youngest camel, he suddenly said, "Look, Hoshmekah, they're carrying sacks of ground corn. They must be for the new king." "They'll have to carry it themselves," Hoshmekah replied. "They can follow that star like the rest of us." But the young camels once again reminded him that he was as strong as 10 horses. So poor old Hoshmekah felt weary just looking at the bags, and he muttered to himself, "My joints, my neck, my knees." But nonetheless, he accepted the miller's sacks and decided to deliver them to the new king. As the day drug onwards, more and more travelers stopped by Hoshmekah's herd, and they loaded him down with many gifts, which included pillars of solid oak, baskets of honey, rare birds in pure silver cages, and sweet meats and fine desserts. And so, as finally the sun began to set into the sky, Hoshmekah, he sighed with relief. As the crowds finally began to melt into the coming night, he was finally able to slouch under the weight of his heavy burden, and he collapsed, thankfully, into the cooling sand. After all, he didn't have to pretend that he was as strong as 10 horses in the darkness. But unfortunately for him, the new day brought fresh burdens and pains. As for, unfortunately for poor Hoshmekah, word of the camel who would take your gifts to the new king had spread like sand before a desert wind. So people lined his path, holding up their gifts for him to deliver to the baby Jesus. And he had to accept them, as the young camels kept reminding him, "But Hoshmakaw, you're so special and you're so strong. Why, you're as strong as 10 horses. So as he continued to accept the gifts, much more things were loaded down onto his burden. There were baskets of money, jewels, necklaces, beads, fine silks, wooden toys, and things I don't even know what to call. All of this and so much more was put onto Hoshmakaw's poor old back. As more and more people began to load him down, he started thinking, "My legs are shaking, my back is aching, I can't carry this much, I'm too loaded down." But more and more people kept coming by. Suddenly, when he thought he was going to collapse, the youngest camel cried out, "Look, it's Bethlehem! You've made it, Hoshmakaw! You really are as strong as 10 horses!" But as Hoshmakaw looked over across the horizon and saw his destination, he strongly doubted he could make it that far. Maybe, just maybe, if he did not stop until he arrived, he could. So this was his goal, and as he continued to stumble forward on breaking legs, a small voice came out of the darkness, and it said, "I have a gift for the baby king." Hoshmakaw turned to see a small boy with dirty hair, a filthy face, and ragged, torn clothing. It's long and light. It's for the king who was born on this night. It's little, I promise." But Hoshmakaw said to the child as he continued to go onwards, "Too little is too much, boy. Please, I can't accept your gift." But the little boy, his heart broke, and he said, "Please, sir, I can't deliver it myself. Didn't I hear them say that you were as strong as 10 horses? And Hoshmakaw, he had to spit out the words, and his voice wheezed with the effort, and he said, "Why, yes, child, No, child, I am not as strong as they say." And as he continued to stumble forward, he looked into the boy's eyes, and he knew he couldn't reject this boy's gift. So he said, "All right, child, give this gift to me, this smaller than small item. What harm can it do after all?" So the little boy, he clapped with delight, and he held out a single broken piece of straw. "It's all I have. It's for the king's bed." Hoshmakaw felt his heart warmed, and he said, "All right, child, do it now. I am nearly there." So the little boy stretched up and he stuck his straw into Hoshmakaw's burden. And with that, he clapped with delight once more, saying, thank you, sir." And he ran off out of sight. But that last straw, the final gift that was given to Hoshmakaw to deliver to the king, pushed him to his limits. As he entered the manger, as he entered the stable, he thought, "My legs are shaking, my knees are loosening, my back is breaking. Will this last straw cause me to fall?" And with that thought, Hoshmakaw's back gave out, and he collapsed just beside the manger. Suddenly he began to think, this is no way for a camel to behave in the king's presence. They will say that Hoshmakaw the weak camel, Hoshmakaw the proud camel, should not have traveled this far. But suddenly, a small hand reached out of the humble manger and touched Hoshmakaw. Of course, it was the new king, and Hoshmakaw's pain seemed to vanish, and he could no longer feel his burden. So he leaned over the small manger, and he said to the child, "Accept these gifts kindly, my king. They have been brought from far and wide by a beast who has acted foolishly." From that moment on, there was no burden, great or small, that Hoshmakaw would not gladly